Hello! I am so excited to be back with a book review. It's been a very long time since I've done one, and I am really happy about the book that I'm about to share with y'all. Before we start, I would really encourage you to look down in the description and check out my books in the link. If you're a lover of fantasy, especially portal fantasy or isekai, you will love my books. So please check them out. They're in the link below. And, let's move on. So, I have for you today The Changeling Tree by Frances Evelyn. This is a book on Amazon. You can't read it through on Kindle Unlimited. I think it's available on other platforms as well, but I only have looked on Amazon. I'll put a link below for the Amazon link. And it's only 99 cents, so I say it's a really good read for just $1. Let me tell you more. So I have a 5-star system where I'm going to talk about plot, characters, setting, and writing technique. And so let me give you an individual score for each of those factors, and then I'll average them all together and give you my overall rating of the book. And I'll talk kind of break down each one just a little bit. I'm going to leave out spoilers as much as I can. If I feel the need to really give you a spoiler for the sake of analysis, then I'll let you know, but I don't think I'll need to do that for this book. So let's get started. All right, so the first thing is plot, and I'm going to give a 5 out of 5 on the plot. It's very, it follows a pretty, standard plot structure where there's rising action, climax, falling action. Now, it does end in a cliffhanger, just so you know, but she has more books published, so you can immediately go to the next book and find out what happens next. So, this plot constantly kept me guessing. I didn't really know what was going on. It kind of took me some figuring out, and that wasn't a bad thing. It wasn't like it was unclear. It was just that things were revealed slowly over time and at the right moment, and then it just clicks. You're like, oh my god, this is from this moment, or this is connected to this. So I think Frances Evelyn does a really good job of kind of intertwining lots of different elements and uncovering them and just revealing tiny connections here and there where you're like, that's what this means and that's where that came from. So to kind of expand more on that, there's an interesting interplay of time. The story has to do with time and how it doesn't exist the same way for everybody. And what I mean by everybody is humans and fairies. So for humans, in the human part of the story, it's kind of taking place in the present day. There's some time passage over the course of the story. It starts out with this little girl being a little baby and then growing up to be a teenager. So it follows that, very linear. It's linear. And then the other part of it takes place within the fairy court. And for fairies, in this story, time doesn't exist the same way for us. They don't really notice time. They don't really notice cause and effect. Things are just so much in the present, in the moment, and they're just going to forget. Memory is not very strong suit for fairies, so they just kind of forget things, and they're just living in the moment. What is it right now that's happening? What am I feeling right now? What do I want right now? I'm going to get it. And then the next second, they're like, oh, I forgot all about what I was doing. So they're basically me whenever I'm trying to find my phone or my keys. And so it's just interesting because we have these two parallel stories going on. And the fairy story does happen in a linear fashion, like there's a cause and effect, but the time thing makes it interesting because the same beats that happen in the fairy storyline match up with certain beats in the human storyline, even if it's a bit wonky. That's all I can really say without giving away too much. And so I think I really appreciated the effort that went into intertwining these two different elements, these two different storylines. And I think that the author did it pretty well, where I can understand what was going on. I knew how things were starting to get connected by the end of the story. And that was really fun to try to figure out because then, once I started noticing things, I was, really paying attention and really looking at, okay, what does this part mean? Who's connected to this part? So, overall, 5 out of 5. Great job with the plot. Characters. So I give that a 4.5 out of 5. And overall, I really enjoyed the characters, both human and the fairies. So most everybody has like kind of a unique voice, unique personality. You can distinguish all the different people just by kind of reading their dialogue and their behaviors. You're going to kind of get the sense of who does what and why. And kind of related to that, they all have distinct motivations, and it's pretty clear what most of their motivations are. Like the Queen of the Fairies has a very clear motivation, and so does her rival, Lord Carrick. There's a few other fairies that have some distinct motivations. On the human side, the motivations aren't quite as clear, but that's not because of a lack of skill from the author. It's more because she's kind of hidden them until later on in the end. And I don't think all of them are quite revealed yet, but we're starting to understand. So just to warn you, like, this is part of a series, so you're not going to get the full entire story in the very first book. I think it's worth going on to the next books, and I'm really excited to go on to the next books. But that's just how it is. So the characters all have something driving them. Even if you don't know what it is exactly, something is driving all of them. And there was a few points where a character would make a decision. Like, for instance, the main character, Rose, her mom makes a decision to send her somewhere that I was like, how does this make any sense? Like, what is this mom thinking, basically? And then you realize later on, oh, I suppose it makes sense, just given what happens after that. But you're still just like, man, this is I'm excited to see what this motivation leads to, because I think I can kind of start to see it, but at the same time you're like, this is crazy, this is not a good idea, but I see why you decided to do that, I think, and we'll find out more. There was one character that I was a bit confused about, or I felt was just kind of dropped off the face of the earth, and I'm not sure if it was for a good reason or not. I'd like to learn more in the next few books. I'm hoping it'll be explored more about what happened to this character, and that would be Rose's dad. He starts out being involved in the story, and over time, he basically doesn't appear anymore for reasons. And it seemed like something happened between Rose's mom and dad that caused them to split up. And I'm hoping that there's like a good reason for it. I guess I would feel a little bit annoyed if I find out that there wasn't really a good reason. It's just like, oh, they just kind of broke up because that's what some parents do, which is true. But in this case, I felt that since her dad played a fairly big part in the beginning of the story, it wouldn't seem very fair to him, I guess, to kind of just drop him. That was just my feeling on it. I understand if there's some conflict that needs to happen between the mom and the dad, or the dad and Rose. That's great. I think that could be a very good avenue to take. However, if he's just been kind of dropped off because it was an extra character that she wanted to get rid of, that'd be a little bit annoying. Not enough to really knock down a whole bunch of like score for characters, because overall they were really good. But for this character, I hope he comes back. I hope he gets a little redeeming moment or something like that. But we'll just have to see, won't we? So the next part would be the setting, or the world building. And I gave this a 5 out of 5 because I thought it was very well thought out, very detailed in some places, especially when it comes to the fairy court. I mean, pretty much all the world building has to do with the fairy court. And I can tell that Frances Evelyn drew a lot of information from like old fairy tales, legends, obscure books from like the 19th century. And it really pays off, because while some things I had to kind of wrap my head around or think about for a second, it was really interesting how she fleshed out the fairy court. It's not your typical like fairy tale. This is not a Disney movie fairy tale. This is like the Brothers Grimm sort of fairy tale, and it's a bit terrifying at times, actually. And I think it kind of returns to the sort of old style of how humans would view the supernatural, which is utterly terrifying. Like, everything about the fairies comes off as a very like whimsical, charming, witty veneer, but then you kind of look past it a little bit and you realize, and Frances Evelyn sneaks these little details in that if you just gloss over it, you're gonna totally miss it. But then if you don't miss it, you're like, oh my god, what is going on in this fairyland? And yeah, so the world building overall, I really enjoyed. I think she did a lot of hard work into like researching and fleshing out this fairy court and how they affect our world and how it ties into different legends that we've like as part of the human experience. I won't go too much into it because I don't want to spoil anything, but I do think it's worth reading, and I really enjoyed reading the parts about the fairy court just because they are so weird. She made it definitely like feel pretty alien compared to the human experience. Like, for one thing, the fact that they don't experience time like we do, and they don't really experience memory or cause and effect the same way we do. And so that leads to some interesting interactions, basically. And some of them are pretty funny, and then other ones are like they're funny, but then you think about it for a second, and especially when it has to do with humans, and you're like, oh my gosh. So overall setting I thought was 5 out of 5. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about, which was writing, prose, technique, I gave a 4.5 out of 5 again. And the main reason that it's a little bit lower than a 5 is nothing really major, but there were some points in the writing that I kind of had to like squint and really look what I was reading, because there was a lot of like big words, and I consider myself pretty well educated in the realm of vocabulary, so I understood most of the words. I can understand how somebody, if they might start to get a little glazed-eyed at some of like, there's like these long, like some longer descriptions that include pretty big words, and it's meant to come up. There's a reason for it, and I think that's why it usually works. It just, at some points it could be a little bit long or a little bit dense. And so like I saw the tone that I was going for, which is kind of like, think of like a 15th century English court where everyone's going to be speaking very formally and using like big Shakespearean words to kind of impress everybody, all of which it really works for the tone and the style of, especially during the fairy court. And the rest of it, the language is very like I would say like kind of like whimsical, witty, charming. There's really good words to describe it. So I really enjoyed the tone of it. It's just that sometimes I would kind of be a little bit hung up on like it stood out a little too much. I wasn't really reading the story. I was just kind of hung up on the words. And that'd be my only like minor criticism about that. The other thing is that I did notice some errors throughout the book. I think it could just use a tiny rinse of editing, and just to get some like missing words or missing punctuation. And otherwise, like it is very well edited. I didn't notice a lot of errors. There were just some, and I don't think it takes away from the story at all. It wasn't so much that I was like bothered by it. It just noticed it every once in a while. So that's why I give it a 4.5 out of 5 on the writing technique. Overall, this story is actually really good, and I think it deserves some love. If you think you would like a story about fairy tales, fairies, time travel, mysteries, I think you would really like this book, especially if you like the more Brothers Grimm sort of style of fairy tale, because that is definitely where this goes. I'm hoping that at the end, after everything is said and done, there is a happy ending. That's my hope. I don't know, because I'm on the edge of my seat a bit with this one, because I just don't know what's going to happen next. That's how well Frances Evelyn has set up this story. I don't really have any guesses. I have my ideas, but I'm kind of like, I don't know. Like, she's going to take it in whatever direction she goes, and I kind of am just along for the ride. And so overall, this book gets 4.75, and I've rounded that up to 5 just in my reviews on Amazon and Goodreads. But yeah, like, very good story. Some minor things here and there that maybe took away from it a tiny bit, but honestly, overall, this is a gem, I say. So check it out, please. I'll put a link down in the comments, and you're welcome to check it out. It's only 99 cents on Amazon, and I believe it's available on other bookstores if you prefer those. Just don't know how much it costs. And look it up, The Changeling Tree by Frances Evelyn. So kudos to Frances Evelyn. She did a great job, and I'm looking forward. I really am excited to read her future books. Thanks, everybody, and have a good one.